So, welcome everybody. I'm Babak Mostagimi, and this is Charlotte Dungan. And together today, we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff about AI and about the future of work and learning and those sorts of things. If you have a device today, that's going to be very useful. So we're going to actually jump into some tools. We're going to let you play around with some stuff. If you're a person who's been doing a lot of this already, cool, jump in, help teach other people. If you're a person who has never done it before, cool too. I was right there in your seat a couple years back. And so we would love to have you just jump right in. At the same time, we're going to show you some very practical tools that you can use like with teachers and stuff like that. We're going to give you some practical tools around how to message to your community, like all those sorts of pieces. We want this to be a very sort of practical based conversation. The thing that we do, though, want to make sure that you guys know is that we aren't advocating for any particular type of school or a program. What we're actually trying to do is make sure that no matter what we're doing and who we're serving, we're getting every kid ready for the future. And we have some opinions on what that future is going to be like. And so no matter what your program is or what type of school you have or what grade level or what classes, we're hopefully going to hone in on some pieces that will be useful to you to making sure that your kids, just like everybody else, are ready for like the future that we're heading into as a society and as a world. Does that work? Okay, so we'll just jump right in. So Charlotte, I'll pass to you to introduce yourself, and then I'll take it from there.
Sure, I'm Charlotte Dungan. I work at the Teach AI initiative at Code.org. Teach AI is a consortium of organizations that are working to promote AI broadly, so much broader than the typical Code.org mission, which is focused on computer science. I was previously a programmer and a database developer for 10 years. And then I had kids and I looked around and I thought, where will I send them to school? It's not any of these. And so I actually went back and got my ed degree and worked in an alternative elementary school that was focused on child-led learning. And then I worked outside of schools in a wide variety of contexts, building my fluency in how children learn. I ran a STEM center for K-12 for a while, and then I found myself at the North Carolina School of Science and Math, where I taught Title I schools, primarily rural schools, and made sure that they had computer science education. And that is how we have intersected over time. We both about the same time ran into AI, and I was teaching it, and Babak was doing it. So I'm a little more technical, but I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so, and I'm Babak Mostagimi. I'm an assistant superintendent with Gwinnett County Public Schools. We're the 12th largest school system in the country, so we have about 180,000 kids. So our scale is massive, but we have schools just like everybody else. We have two schools in the new schools portfolio. One is Secondary High School, which is the first AI-themed high school in the country that we kicked off a while back. It's in year 2. And then we also have McClure Health Science High School, which is in year 5 now, that was also in the new schools portfolio. And so a lot of what we're going to do today is actually talk through the sort of big picture of pieces. We're going to have some conversation around foundational AI literacy concepts. So don't worry, we're starting at the sort of root for everybody, just like we did. We're going to go into AI and DEI and have some conversations there. We're going to show and share some practical tools for schools that you can use, both in terms of AI tools and things just supporting messaging and marketing around this stuff. We're going to dive into an example model and learning framework around like how you can think about practically upgrading what you're doing every day with teachers. And then throughout this, you'll see various policies and practices you can use today. And we're just going to make sure all those things are present. Because we're a smaller group, we can sort of pivot and adjust time as needed. So if there's an area where you're like, I need more of this, or if you're like, nah, I'm good on this, like feel free to give us that signal outright. Like there'll be like, we're good. We have plenty of pieces to dive deep into. We just want to make sure that we're meeting you all where you're starting. Does that make sense? So before we get any further, I do want to do like a really quick poll to figure out who's in the room. Okay, so who here is like elementary? Oh, look at that. Okay, who here is middle? And it's okay to keep your hand up still. Okay, who here is high school? Okay. Oh, it's like a good cross section. Okay. By raise of hands, like how many of y'all would say like I like know about AI? I use it every day. Okay. Awesome.
Wow,
okay.
Okay.
All right. Look at that. So how many of you would be like I literally have I like don't know anything. I haven't tried this before.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Excellent. All right. So we have a good mix. Okay, but use it once a week. Okay, fair enough, but that's good. So the goal here is there are going to be moments where I'm going to ask you guys to sort of riff off of one another and to show each other different things, because we're going to jump into some tools, get people into it, playing around with some new things. And if you've like done that, been there, done that, share with other people what you've been able to do, so that we can get people on the same page and sort of level up all of us. Does that make sense, y'all? Okay, so let's get right into it.
Yeah, so let's talk about what artificial intelligence is. It's all around us. So if you think that you don't use it, then you probably don't drive a car or own a phone. You probably don't watch Netflix either. AI is embedded in our hardware. So this Star Trek communicator involves sensors that give information that are processed by AI algorithms. I'll give you a great example. Do you remember the point and shoot camera era, where you might go take a picture and then you would take your film and it was processed? And then we got these digital cameras and they started building them into our phones. And not only are they more convenient because they're always with us, they're way better quality than those old cameras. And the reason is because of software, not because of the hardware that's in this device that's about the same size. It's because AI can adjust the lighting level automatically for you. It can track a face. It can erase something that you don't want in the image. And so AI, even if you don't realize you're using it, you are using it. You're using it to navigate here, to take the appropriate type of travel. So let's say that you are needing to get from here to the airport. Perhaps you're taking public transit. Perhaps you're taking a car. Maybe you're taking a bicycle. And the route would be different depending on which ways that you chose to map. That is adaptive. So it's knowing if you need to avoid a car accident, for example. AI is choosing the best route for you without you having to think about it. So it's all around us. It's helping navigate whether or not I should buy another pair of Converse. The answer is yes. And it's suggesting what we should do next. It's also in our farms. So we're able to, with precision agriculture, get a higher yield for a smaller amount of fertilizer and water. We can target pests and ensure that we zap weeds with lasers. Those are real. They're not in the future. They're right now. It also means that people are doing less physical labor and they're using devices to do some of that manual labor for us. Some AI is protecting us. It is letting you know on your phone if a transaction looks weird. Someone used your credit card and you got an automated response. There was no human in that loop. There was an AI that was flagging something that maybe you're annoyed because you did actually buy it, but thankfully it does work for real also. We also see this sometimes with insurance rates, that where you live, your zip code can determine what you pay for your house insurance or your renter's insurance. I moved from the south part of my town to the north part of my town, and even though I got a bigger house, my house insurance went down. It was because of my zip code. Durham, North Carolina was traditionally a red-lined town. And so I lived in a place that was primarily previously African-American. I moved to a place that was primarily previously all white, and my insurance rates still reflected that historical inequity. So sometimes we do have to be aware of bias that is built into AI and how it affects our daily lives. It's really hard to have conversations about that if you don't know why the bias is there and how I can talk to my insurance agent about, like, what the heck's going on, man? Why did I get a bigger house and pay less money? Like, why would that be? We also see AI in, have anybody seen James Webb Space Telescope images? You guys seen the beautiful pictures of like the galaxies? Well, that space telescope doesn't actually take in any data that our eyes can see. All of that is processed through algorithms. They're collecting X-rays and other types of cosmic rays. And so this big sensor is the telescope, and AI processes those images so that we can see them with our eyes. Foreign language translation is really common, mapping and navigation. What we want you to know is it's not alive, it's not smarter than us. It is doing what we ask it to do, for better or for worse. So just as there are good and bad people in the world, AI is going to do things that good and bad people ask it to do. And so it's not just for geniuses or people in tech cities, it's all around us. It is software and hardware working together, and it's not going away. So even if you're unaware of the best and latest and coolest tool, you're probably interacting with it on a daily basis. Some of you said, I only use it sometimes. Do you want to change your answer? Okay, great. Great.
I always think I'm like, we're either using it or it's using us. So yeah, a good thing to remember.
So in education, it is with us also. So I know you may be using personalized learning already. We can do differentiation in seconds, which we're going to show you. I love UDL. I love it. It's really hard to do at scale because it takes so long. AI helps us to make sure that we're differentiating our classrooms for the needs of our students. And I'm going to go ahead and say we increase student persistence with AI because we can tailor the work to the student. We can even help out converting handwriting from digital to printed to digital and back. We can change text to speech and speech to text, and we can translate for students. We are not trying to replace teachers. What we are trying to do is offload some of the rote and difficult and time-consuming work so that students can do the uniquely human things that they do in classrooms related to connection and motivation and all those things that we want, the best practices in classrooms. We want to empower teachers to be able to do those. We're not trying to solve every single problem. We're not trying to take up time for busy educators by making them do one more thing, and we're not trying to add a subject to your curriculum. So that's not the goal of what we're talking about today. What we do want to promote is an AI literacy, a foundational understanding of the technology. And so I did, I can statements here. Sometimes schools use those. I don't know that you would, if you just read this list, they do have to do with AI, but they also have to do with the things we're already doing. Can I personalize my learning? Can I make it matter for me? Can I have access to safety and privacy with my data? Can I cite my writing appropriately? Am I prepared for the future of work? Am I an informed citizen? Those are goals that we already have for students. They just have a little bit of a spin with AI. And so we want to make sure that this is a big definition. It's a fancy one. But the general idea is, can I use applications? Can I think ethically as a result of AI? Do you have something to add there?
Yeah, so the piece that I'd add here is keep in mind we haven't cited any sort of subject area or content, right? This is content agnostic. And it's the idea that what we're trying to not repeat is what happened with computer science back in the day, or with like keyboarding, where it's like a separate class, you'd go to it, do it real quick, and then you'd go on with the rest of your day. Because AI is impacting our world in such a big, dramatic way across the board, it doesn't make sense to treat it like as a separate subject. And so part of like our hypothesis or theory as a team here today is that actually this AI literacy work needs to be embedded like everywhere, every day, eventually. Not like, it doesn't have to be like a big revolution today, but we're going to share with you like the small steps we can take to get kids, families, communities ready for this work.
Great. So one subtype of AI, and Babak and I have been doing this before generative AI was really on the scene, but if you've used a ChatGPT type activity or maybe created an image from an AI, these were all created by a computer. I asked it to make me a picture of generative AI, and it made a picture of itself. And so generative AI is a tool that creates text, images, computer code, even sound, based on a lot of data that's been collected in various formats. So this is what schools are afraid of or reacting to in the last year, because all those essays and things that we used to ask students to write, a computer can now do that. So we're reacting a lot here. Should we say anything else about it? Should we?
So on the text side, the image side, et cetera, the key thing with generative AI is it's creating like brand new, like bespoke content, right? So like it's when you have like these like organizations that say we can like figure out if it's an AI that's like that's written this or not to discover cheating and stuff, it's actually usually they can't. And not usually. It's like I think OpenAI itself said they actually took down their own bot because it like you can't figure out if it's human built or AI built.
Yeah. So let's talk about what that means for real. So this is going to be an example. If you have a computer, you can play along, okay? This is, you guys teach Great Expectations if you're in high school, maybe. It's a common text. It is available online. It is common that people use it in 9th grade or 8th grade. And so it is, we're gonna look at the difference between the pre-generative AI era and how you might use that, and like you might do a Google search, and like what generative AI can bring to the table. Okay, so
if you have your computers, be a good time to pop it out.
Yes, you can do this too. If
you can, because you'll get a different set of answers than we will, which is the cool part about generative AI. We can all be doing the same task, and it'll give you like slightly nuanced or different answers depending.
Okay, so I'm just going to start at Google, and I'm going to write in Great Expectations. And this is probably what you've done in the past. You've searched for Great Expectations. And what you'll see here is I can get information about Great Expectations on Wikipedia, about the book. Maybe I could watch a movie about it. And the third link is the book itself. So at Project Gutenberg, I can see the full uncopyrighted text because it's outside of copyright. And here's the chapter list. So I'm going to go to chapter XL111. I don't know what that means because I'm a 9th grader who doesn't remember Roman numerals. But here's my text. And I can take this and I can actually just copy it. There it is. And Control C. And then if I wanted to know about XLIII, if I wanted to know what was going on in this chapter, right now, generative AI is telling me what Great Expectations is about. It's also, though, if I wanted to, in the olden days, know about the themes of this, I would go to SparkNotes. That's what kids used to do. We're going to use Bing Chat, though, or maybe we'll use Bard. Can you pull that? There's a couple of different generative AIs we can use. Because I'm not signed into any of them, I can't actually use all of them because it will kick me out for using up all my time. So bard.google.com is what I'm going to use right now. Bard.google.com. Hi, I'm Bard.
All right, so here, pause 1 second. So if you have a computer right now, and how many of you have used Bard, Google Bard? Okay, All right, perfect. Okay, so if you've used it or if you haven't, try and get on there. And if you don't have a computer, sort of pair with somebody nearby or use a phone, although it's easier on a computer. But okay, so we're at bard.google.com.
Okay, so I am going to give Bard the text that I just copied from Great Expectations. And I'm going to say, tell me the important vocabulary words from this text. And then I'm going to copy it. And there it goes. It's thinking. Oh, it didn't go. Let me try it again. Oh, it doesn't matter.
Just pick whatever chapter you want and put it in there.
Well, I was actually trying to match it to say, like, if I just asked ChatGPT.
Oh, gotcha. What does anybody remember what chapter we were doing? XLIII.
Oh. Apparently, I still haven't learned to type backwards. Okay. Okay, so you can see here I made a mistake in my copying before, and all I did, oh, that's weird. Okay, it gave me a weird result.
Yeah, that's super weird. So you can see it doesn't always work.
Yes. Show me the important. Okay, so now it showed me the important vocabulary words from what I typed in. Don't include names. So I'm talking to it now. And I'll say now, give me definitions. and I'm having a conversation with this to help me understand the text. So here, now it's giving me some of the important words. And I can also have it write me a version for a 5th grader. So I, as a person who may not understand all of the words or context of Great Expectations, can rewrite the text so that I can access it at my reading level. So no longer is the teacher even required to do that differentiation, but me as a student, I can rewrite something for my own level. I do this all the time, friends, when I go to the library and I pick a crafting book for children. Because if I want to learn knitting, I don't want to learn it from an adult book. I want to learn it broken down for a 5th grader. And so you can use this too. If you're struggling with a concept for something that's really difficult, you can have it re-level it for you. You can also, here's some things that what it did. It even tells you. I simplified the language. I used shorter sentences. I removed details that were not important. I added clarifying information, such as explaining that the man looked like he had been traveling for a long time. I made sure I used age-appropriate vocabulary. I can also keep going. I can ask for main ideas. I can have it ask me sample questions that I might ask about the text. As a teacher, I might get a list of questions that I would talk with students about in a discussion in a classroom. I can put in my test review questions and have it quiz me. I can have it talk to me in the voice of a character. I can say, and I'll do it right now, pretend you are Pip from Great Expectations. Tell me about your life. My life has been a journey of self-discovery and moral transformation. Born into humble circumstances, I spent my early years in the marshes of Kent, blah, 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 right? Like, I can actually have a conversation. I can have this talk to me from the perspective of different characters. So that's very, very different than your average Google search. Do you guys want to play for a little bit? Yeah, yeah.
How do you have, so one thing I've experienced is the prompt to input. So being new to it, you know, it's kind of like you start like a Google string search, right? Like,
Yeah.
So what tips or tools do you have for novice users to create a prompt? So like sentence them, start.
Sure.
What kind of tools do you have?
So that's a good question, and some of it depends on your philosophy on how you should approach these things. From my personal experience and for our work at secondary high school, my philosophy has been let people play and figure out their prompts on their own. Because what we found is when we tell people use these prompts, they end up only using those, and then they don't venture from those, right? But here's the sort of tip that I'd give broadly. Usually, and if you want to jump in right now, go to Bard or to Claude or to Bing Chat, whichever one you choose. Bard is an easy one you can log into. It's free to get into. Try out something that you're wondering, right? So for example, how many of you guys have had to write like a parent letter about something and send it out to your parents? Okay, yeah, like very typical task, right? What you can actually do is like you can prompt it specifically to go, hey, like I want to write a parent letter about X, right? And it'll give you an answer, right? And then you'll sit there and go, that's not exactly what I wanted, right? And then so you go, okay, well, can you be more specific about, and what essentially I tell people is as you're writing a prompt, the more specific you can be about what you want, the better the outcome's going to be. And so the more people play around with specificity and what it understands and doesn't, the better it works. Does that make sense? So if it's okay with you all, and are you guys interested in like jumping into one of these tools and like just trying it out for a little bit? And or if you, how many of you guys are like, this is going to be boring, I've already done this before, like I'm good? Okay, all right, no, all right, cool. So it's okay to say it, like that's fine. So here, let's do this. If you would, log into one of these tools. I would recommend Bard as an easy first one, or Bing Chat is an easy one. Log into there, find something that you're like, I would like some help with this, and see what it comes up with. Let's say you're trying to draft, let's say you're a brand new school and you're trying to draft a mission statement, or you're trying to draft a parent letter, or you're trying to figure out the process for how you come up with like your teacher observations in your school. Let's try some prompts out here. We're going to take about 5 minutes or so. Just try it out. We'll come around and play around. Play with the people at your table, or join tables, and see what we can come up with. Let's see what we can break, right? Let's see what it can't do and what it can do. Does that work, y'all?
And one way that you get more precise results is to say who you want it to be. So you can say, I am a school administrator.
There you go.
I want a plan for this, which would give you a very different result. Students write things like, give me an essay that looks like it's written by an 8th grader, have at least 3 spelling mistakes. So that it's really hard to detect.
Yep.
They prompt engineer to get the results that they want. So you can too by giving it a persona.
Yeah, so jump in there for a minute and let's play around. We'll come around. If you don't have a computer, feel free to join one of these tools before, which is a small group. How many of you are like, oh, this is kind of interesting? Like, yeah? Can you tell us what you did?
Yeah, we have a data day on Monday, and so I asked it to give me a set of data analysis questions for the FDA interim assessment.
Were they good? Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of cool. What I'd say is like you can get to 80% with the output, and then it's up to you to sort of get to the 100%. And again, that's from a person. How long have you been using this tool? Yeah, like 10 minutes ago. Like imagine over time as you're like building like the prompt engineering pieces and understanding more of what you can put in and ask, like what you can do with it. Another question that was brought up was around like, hey, can you use this to like generate slide decks and stuff like that? And so there are 2 things I want to make you aware of. With these tools, like right there, I put, for example, hey, create a 10-slide deck on AI readiness for K-12. The audience is school leaders in the New Schools Invent portfolio. And it starts putting together the content of what's on those slide decks in terms of showing you what the 10 slides could be. Now, this is going to be outdated very, very soon here. Both Microsoft and Google already have pieces where you can generate the full slide, like the actual slides and all the content in it. And some of them, and they're already outside of these tools, there are other tools you can use where you can say, give me a slide deck on future readiness, and it'll do everything from like pulling the stats down to building the charts and putting it all there for you. And then all you're really doing is going, okay, let me look at this, let me double check and make sure it's correct, and then adding and subtracting. And so Microsoft right now already has a product called Copilot, which I want to say is like a $30 a month tool that allows you to auto-generate all those sorts of like PowerPoints and those sorts of pieces. And they're getting to the point, and this will be cool for school leaders, where you can actually put in whole like Excel files of like data and go give me like the top 10 highlights, like tell me what I should be worried about, like those sorts of pieces, or give me like 5 talking points about this data set. So imagine it's the day after you just got state reports back, or even the day of, and someone's like, what do you think? You're like, I haven't had a chance to go all the way down. It can help you go into those details pretty quickly.
Yeah, and so Canva, so we were just looking at this back table at Canva, which has magic tools. So a lot of tools have AI built into them to do the task-specific work. So Canva you would use to create images, and it can fix some of the problems or resize automatically for you so that you're not creating a separate flyer and an email. They're all aligned. And GitHub, Copilot, GitHub is owned by Microsoft. Copilot is writing half of our computer code in America right now by developers who are in the field. So we know that there'll be big transitions with AI in the computer science classroom as well.
So the purpose of us doing this wasn't just to get you into the tools, but to remind you that like these tools are at their nascent phase right now. Imagine later on what our kids are going to graduate into and what the tools are going to be like then, right? And so then the question is like, what's the purpose of education? What are we actually preparing them for? Are we preparing them for a world that's like interacting with and like upgraded by the existence of these tools? So I just want to make sure that like context frame wise, you're thinking about like, what does this mean for kids in my classrooms today in terms of what they're going to graduate into as well?
Yeah, so you might think about how you might redesign some of your classroom assignments because this exists. It's not really, my son will do all of his sentence writing with AI these days. So it's not really a way to go. Yeah.
There are lots of, sort of smaller independent tools nowadays, right? So the big break tools in terms of like helping teachers and everything versus some of the bigger search engines and sort of the mix and match of all those?
Sure. So we are in the crux of all that with Secondary High School, right? So we have an AI themed high school that's working on this, and we have to do this big balance between how much. So like we still have teachers, they still have lessons, and how much time do they have to go learn like all the new tools and all the latest things, right? And what we're realizing is that there's like hype cycles that happen with some of the micro tools. But then oftentimes the capabilities of those micro tools get sucked up into sort of these bigger organizations. OpenAI recently sort of flipped a whole bunch of stuff on its head and put a bunch of pieces or companies out of business with some new sort of things they have around functionality for their like creation of GPTs and that sort of stuff. And so right now, what I would say is like, if there are tools that people like using or there's a very precise problem, like it's good to go find that particular thing, but to keep in mind that it's highly likely that tool is going to go under or be bought up by someone else pretty quickly here, because that's the way the market's working right now. So we're in that moment where like everyone's developing a bunch of stuff and nothing has quite sort of created market dominance yet. So from like the perspective of our school, for example, we don't only go with one tool or another because we're like, our kids are going to go into a world where they're like all sorts of stuff, right? Like they're not going to go into a Google world or into a Microsoft world, hopefully, or into an Amazon world, right? They're going to go into a world where they're going to need to do all these things. So we try and make it less about the tool and the type of thinking you need to be able to use a tool, both in terms of using it and not using it, and what the outputs are and what's actually going on in the background. So that's a great question. Yeah.
What policies are you using, policies for students and for like faculty? And then is it, does it like, with like technology, with your tech department, like you have like monitoring or like that?
So we're going to get into the policy side in just a minute. On the tech blockage side, absolutely, that's where it always starts. And then I have to call up and be like, dude, what are you doing? And like, well, we didn't know, so we blocked it. I'm like, that can't be our reflex. Like, your reflex can't be anti. It needs to be, are there actual security risks? If so, then do something. But if it's just like, I don't feel comfortable because I don't know enough about it, like our kids are using this on their personal phones anyways. So back when ChatGPT became a big thing, people from our technology side, for example, came to me. They're like, what do you want us to do? I'm like, leave it open. And they're like, but New York just like banned it. That New York City Public Schools back in the day banned it. And I'm like, they'll retract that. Just give it some time. Let's not be them. And sure enough, they retracted it. And I get it. They have like 1 million something kids. Like, you got to be careful, right? And they put in a bunch of other policies in place. But we'll get into those specifics here in just a minute.
We will. So what we've just been showing and talking about is generative AI, but there's a whole other type of AI. Can you hit the button? There we go. Called predictive AI. And this is another thing that we see in schools. It's a little more hidden, but I want to explain how it works because it does happen where we use personalized learning. And personalized learning is, did a student learn a thing? We predict that they're going to. There's a concept mastered or not. But actually, we need to look at if they actually learned it. So a software might say a student has learned a concept, and in fact, they've learned the concept. That's a good thing. That's what we want to happen. Or if we know that they haven't yet mastered it, we can give them more practice and opportunity to master that concept by, let's say, giving them a few more math problems along those lines, or giving them a different type of explanation. But we also have these risks here where a student has mastered something, but it says they've mastered it, but they haven't, right? That's a danger because we've moved them on, but they didn't actually master the concept. We also have this problem where a student has not mastered a concept, but it says, oh yeah, he's good to go. He knows his multiplication, we're moving on, and they haven't actually. So when we're evaluating software, we actually have to see if these things are true, if we're reducing errors. Now, these things do not require AI to have the same types of problems. Babak's son was not working to his full potential on some tests, and then when he actually tried, turns out he was really, really far ahead. And it's funny how those things, it doesn't have to be digital for this to be true, but we do need to make sure that the tools that we employ for students are accurate. And so asking about accuracy and how our AI systems work is something that we can do. This is going to be more important for your IT teams or for your own selection of tools. It's with your own AI literacy to ensure that the outcomes are what you expect, and that there isn't bias in these systems, that they're informed guesses. They're not the end-all be-all. So we always want to keep a person in the loop, making sure that these systems are working as intended.
All right, so why should we do something? And this is why, like the big why for all of us, right? And so hopefully what I'm going to do here is arm you all with some of the key sort of talking points that will help you sort of make the case for why this matters. It's very, very common for folks, especially parents, to be like, like my kid's not a STEM kid, or my kid's not going to go into AI, so therefore they don't need to know this, right? Like how many of you guys are internet people? Right? Like, was it like, I don't really use the internet. Yeah, that's not a thing, right? Like, you might as well not breathe these days. Like, whether you're using it, it's using you. Like, something's going to happen. And the same thing is happening with AI. Now, the other piece of it, and we forget this often, and when I bring this up, people go, oh, like, good reminder, is if you have a kindergartner registering today, they'll graduate in 2036, right? So the question is what we're doing right now in that kindergarten class preparing that kid for 2036 or not, right? I would venture to say, by the hundreds of classrooms that I've been into, we're actually looking more in the rear view mirror than we are ahead. Like kindergarten looks more like it did when I was in kindergarten than it looks like what it should perhaps look like, right? And we'll talk about what that means in a minute, because what I'm not talking about is every kindergartner on like a tablet or something. That's not what I'm talking about. But are the types of thinking and the things they're learning about getting them ready for that world? I have a second grader. Last year she was in first grade. She spent 9 weeks on trees, and I'm like, okay, like that's the thing? Like that's the only thing she needed to really learn about was trees. Okay, great. Like then she spent 9 weeks on birds. And I'm like, oh, like, come on guys, like what are we doing? Now this is kind of cool because I also have a sixth grader today, right? And he's going to hopefully, God, please, he will graduate in 2030, okay? Again, 2030, whole different world. Like imagine what's happened in the realm of AI and this technology just in the last year and a half. Now project like what are we in? 2023? Like 7 years. I can't even remember what the date, it's going so rapidly, right? Imagine what life is going to look like for them. And that's just high school graduation, right? That's not even thinking about when they're like, so assume Kaveh, who's my 11-year-old, let's assume he goes straight into college. That's 2034 potentially. With my luck, it'll be like 2038. But he'll be coming out of college, right? I'm just joking. I love my child, and he's a very smart kid, right? Like as everyone believes, right? But then last but not least, a child born today will graduate in 2041. Okay? Like, yeah, let that sink in, right? Like are we teaching like the 2040s, or are we teaching like the 2000s? And if we can't get rid of the sort of 21st century mantra, where I'm like, dude, at what point is it just skills? Because we're like in the 21st, or we're 23 years in, and we're still talking about the need for 21st century skills. Like we need to get to a place where every kid is prepared. And the thing that literally keeps me up at night is, will our children be ready? Like, or are we wasting our time? And now there's a big set of people who are making a bet against us. And these are the people who are in workforce retraining. And they've actually started building the workforce retraining programs for kids as soon as they graduate from high school so that they can go into jobs. I'm sitting there going, y'all, if we had the kid for 13 years and they have to go through a program before they can get a job, that means we really wasted time. Does that make sense? Now, I know it's hard because we still have standards and all this other stuff that we have to do, but I think there are ways that we can do those to make it actually work. Now, notice the date on this, right? This is a future jobs report from 2020 from the World Economic Forum talking about 2025. 2025 is like a year and change away from now, right? Like they don't list math, they don't list science, they don't list social studies. Not saying that those things aren't important, but it's not about just the content. It's how we learn the content. So the analytical thinking and innovation, the resilience and stress tolerance and flexibility, like leadership and social influence, we can do all those things through the content. Right now, what we're doing is content through the content on average, right? Now, when we walk into those dynamic classrooms that are spectacular, the reason they're spectacular is because they're actually getting to these things, and you can feel it in that room. Does that make sense, y'all? And so as we're thinking about this, as we're talking to parents and families and to our own staff, like the biggest thing with a lot of my teachers, like we didn't hire a bunch of kindergarten teachers who wanted to teach AI in kindergarten, right? Like that's not a thing. Like kindergarten teachers wanted to like teach children, have some cool small groups, teach them how to read, all that sort of stuff. But when you start asking them, hey, are you preparing them for the future? All of a sudden it changes things, right? Now I'm saying this as a form, like I taught kindergarten as a student teacher. They very quickly realized I shouldn't be in kindergarten and made me a 5th grade teacher. I literally tripped over my first kid because I didn't look far enough down. But that speaking, even the best kindergarten classes are building complex problem solving skills, are building reasoning, are building creativity, originality, are building leadership and social influence in the kids, right? So then the question is, will AI widen the digital divide or not?
This is my greatest fear, because we gave certain students, but not all students, computers. We gave certain students, but not all students, training about those computers, high-speed internet, on and on. Do we allow them to have a phone? Why or why not? And who is going to be empowered to learn with and about AI? Who's actively going to be banned from those technologies because we're afraid of them, or because we as the adults aren't going to do the work to learn about them? And honestly, this problem is about us, not about them, because they're going to use AI regardless of whether or not we teach it. It's just whether they do it with your blessing, or whether we do it with instruction and ethical guidance and critical thinking, or if they just go use Snapchat's AI on their own, right? So the choice isn't whether or not they will use AI, it's whether or not they'll do it with our guidance. And so I hope that we can prevent that. So yeah, this is where a lot of people are. How do we stop kids from cheating? This is like the #1 question I get from teachers. And what I'll say to that is, you already have an academic integrity policy. You just need to update it in order to include how to properly cite generative AI, and perhaps a red, yellow, green stoplight system about certain assignments. This is a red assignment. You need to do it on your own independently. A yellow assignment is that there are certain parameters for how you use AI. A green assignment is go for it. Your draft is probably a green assignment. Your citation is a yellow type of assignment. A red assignment is the assessment in your classroom. So with a simple stoplight and a simple student use policy, you're probably all set to address this issue with your academic integrity intact. Then we can start to think about, oh wow, what tools can we actually use to improve our classroom instruction right now, not for some additional goal, but for the learning goals we already have to optimize the learning objectives. And then I do have teachers ask me this, will AI replace teachers? No, because there's 8-year-olds there. There's got to be an adult in the room also for the 14-year-olds. And so let's worry less about replacing teachers and more about rethinking education, where teachers are focusing more on their important, unique skills and relationships. Okay, well, this is just very basically, like, we expect all students to learn some science throughout K-12. We also need to make sure that they have technology literacy in the same way that we teach science K-12. Instead of birds, maybe we're talking about robots. Most people apply knowledge of science for their own benefit, like, how am I going to cook? How's the weather working? Can I fix something in my home? Most students also need to apply AI technologies in their life and career. We are not trying to build either an army of scientists or an army of AI developers. That's not the goal. So every time we talk about a benefit, we also talk about a risk. Everything that you implement, you just have to make sure that you're mitigating the risk to achieve the benefit. So for example, if you're adding tutoring or personalized learning, you just need to make sure that you're using a software that addresses privacy and data issues so that you can use that safely for students. I mean, creativity and collaboration is great. Let's make sure that they're able to do those things without loss of critical thinking, and that's by lesson design. So, realizing the benefits, mitigating risks.
Okay, so the other side of this is also talking to people about the forecasts of AI. Because a lot of people don't see what's already here. It's not even about what's coming, right? So Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, all sorts of different places have forecasted about what's going to happen to the job market, right? Now, the interesting thing here is there's like two sort of things that are going to happen at the same time. At one level, there are going to be actual jobs that get eliminated, right? So for example, IBM just recently paused hiring for all jobs that AI could do. That's 7,800 jobs that they're just going to pause replacement of, right? That means jobs literally went away, okay? The other side, though, that's equally as important, or perhaps more important for most of our students, is that the percentage of your current job that's going to be automated. Meaning, for example, just now, you built out a set of questions with an AI tool. That just automated away one part of your job, right? Imagine all the other things that you can automate away. So the idea is that 30% of the activities in 60% of all occupations could be automated, right? That fundamentally changes the calculus of like how many people you need to hire and for what and what they're doing, right? And so now there are a lot of different forecasts and stuff out there. I actually think these are underestimating what's going to happen. Because as I'm seeing teachers and things like that using AI to augment how they're teaching, it's making lesson planning way easier. It's making differentiation way easier. It's taking like really big pieces of work and making it easier, which is great because teachers have already been overburdened for a long time. In other industries, it's going to be less great because it's going to mean that instead of needing 10 people, you need 2, and that sort of piece, right? So it's important that people, as you're talking to people, that you're forecasting the impacts of AI. Now, there's also a study done by Clever, a survey rather, where they're looking at teachers and administrators and whether they feel that AI will have a significant impact in their classrooms and in their work. And you see that the vast majority of administrators and teachers do believe that, right? On the other side, though, and this is slightly worrying, is that only about half express concerns about the challenges of AI, meaning that we're not really thinking through like the negative side. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, right? Other things can happen. For example, the cheating pieces, the plagiarism pieces, the bias pieces, when you type in certain things, depending on, like, for example, there are image generators, just like you guys were typing in text. When I say, give me a picture of a classroom of kids on computers, 9 times out of 10, every kid in the classroom is white or Asian, and most of them are boys, right? That means that there's something wrong with the data input into that algorithm, right? Our kids need to know and understand that so that they don't just start, like, it essentially mimics the real world in terms of what we're seeing and talking about on the internet. And so our kids need to be ready for that world. Similarly, in terms of fastest growing and fastest declining job types, if we're like honest, most of our kids, when they leave high school, they're going to go into some profession, right? And so we better not be preparing kids for professions that won't exist, right? And so if you're looking at declining jobs, things like bank tellers and related clerks, postal service clerks, cashiers, et cetera, are all on the list. I make this joke every time, but the only one I'm proud about is like the less legislators and officials, because I'm like, come on, y'all have big staffs and big offices, and we here in public schools don't have enough folks on our teams, right? But realistically, these are all like good paying jobs that would support a family that are on the decline. So imagine how much they're going to decline by the time we get to 2040 and beyond. Does that make sense, y'all? Are y'all with me? Okay, so let's keep going, and I'm going to go over this really quickly. This is from 2016, so this isn't even taking into account all the pieces from generative AI. This is saying the average automation potential by metropolitan area. I'm from Atlanta, so right here, right? That's a huge dot of 44 to 46% of our jobs and things being automated away, right? That was a forecast from 2016. We're getting closer and closer to this over time. Okay, so you'll notice, hopefully you all see it, well, not hopefully, but you likely see a dot somewhere on the map that reflects where you are located in the US. Is that fair? Or close by? Yeah? All right, yeah, so that's a problem because that means that we need to do something differently for our students.
Yeah, one last thing is the job least likely to be automated: plumber, child care worker, HVAC. Those are the things that we don't yet have robots for. So when you think about the jobs that are available in your community, you might want to think about it through the lens of what can be replaced. Even in agriculture, a single harvesting robot can replace 30 humans in the field. This isn't a bad thing in certain areas for where we don't have enough workers in the fields anymore. It's not always bad to replace humans with machines. But we need to look at our own local context and what jobs may be available for our students and make sure that we're preparing them for that reality.
Perfect. Now, I'm looking at time because we started about 15, 20 minutes late. So we're going to speed this up a little bit. But going into AI and DEI, there are a lot of people who are pessimistic about the future in terms of where the work is heading. Can you? Oh, Perfect. Okay, so in terms of AI usage in education, what we found from a report from the Center for Democracy and Technology is that usage among teachers and students of AI in education is high. Students with IEPs and our 504 plans report the highest use of generative AI tools. I'll tell you what, my own son who has an IEP, he's on the autism spectrum, he found ChatGPT on his own. He's been doing all sorts of cool stuff. And I'm like, dude, technically you're 11 and shouldn't be using this, but wow, that's really, really, really interesting and exciting as well. But a lot of people still are wondering whether or not it can be used for academic purposes. I think we're gonna get there, / we're already there. It's just a matter of getting fully there. Outside of that, though, we really have an optimistic view. We think that AI, if we do it well, and if we are helping to get our kids from our schools into those rooms and onto those boards and leading these companies, AI will be able to help us solve a lot of big, hard problems, like translation services, for example, like how to differentiate, and we'll show you a tool in a minute about that. AI around cultural responsiveness. There's like a really cool tool that's being built where you can essentially input your lesson plans, whatever your lesson plan is, and it will upgrade it with direct links to like African-American history, with key Black moments, with cultural upgrades from the African-American culture in the United States, and insert it right into the lesson so you can just take it from there. So like really fascinating things that can happen there. Obviously, we're hearing about personalized tutoring a whole lot. The data and analytics pieces are going to be neat, and then the AI with image adjustments is going to be really fascinating as well to see how much that opens the world up for people. So let's keep going. We're going to skip that one. We're going to jump right into the practical tools. So we're going to show you a couple of these. We probably won't show the whole videos and we can skip one or two. But we really wanted to show you some of the cool tools that are out there, so you can see what the range of possibility is.
This one, I think you do have to see it.
Yes,
so maybe
yeah, this one is cool.
The thing I love about surfing is it never stops challenging you. It's a journey through the waves, but also for your very soul.
These nuggets are made from chicken.
Manatees are the Cadillac of marine mammals.
Just wanted to welcome you to the team with this little video. You need to capture your screen while recording yourself? The script does that.
I make the taste of like non-chicken nuggets.
Yeah, I would too for.
So these nuggets are made from chicken.
Okay, we'll stop there. This is a tool for which you can record, create a voice print of yourself, use a text editor to quickly edit out any mistakes, and have your video speak in your voice. Or if I've created a voice print and I want to give it to Babak here, he could edit it for me. He can add video, edit the video within the, right there in the generator, and I can make this collaborative as well. So if I give this tool to students, this is not the future. This already exists. This is not magic. We're taking a process that takes hours or days, and I can do it in minutes. Or me as the administrator, I might not even be involved at all. I might pass this off to someone in my front office to make a video on my behalf because they are using my voice print with my authorization.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now here's the thing. Think about what that could do for you, all the videos and things that it could make your life easier for. Think about all the bad things your kids could do with this as well, right? And the reason I put that out there is that the tools are accessible to kids, right? So the question is, are we going to be building in like the ethical sort of conversation so that kids understand what the ramifications are for doing unethical things? Like what is ethical and unethical with this? Does that make sense?
Okay.
The thing I love about chicken.
It never wants me to go to the next slide here. There we go. Okay, so this is Gradescope, and Gradescope is a way, there are lots of auto-grading technologies, but Gradescope is one for which you as the teacher control the output. And I'm not going to show the whole video because it's very talky, but the idea here is that you can have a bunch of answers inputted either digitally or with paper. Students can scan, or you can scan all of their answers in, or they can write. So there's actually fill in the blanks as well as multiple choice. This example is about multiple choice. You get all the student data. Let's say you teach chemistry and you get 200 exams, and they're both written, they have math, they have words, they have boxes that you've checked, maybe you've colored a map. All of those answers can be inputted here, and then the AI groups all of the responses so that you have the whole range of what students have submitted, and then you can actually give personalized feedback only to the aggregate. So you can look through every individual response if you want, but there's only actually 6 different answers that were given. So I type all of my responses, and it goes to every student individually, and I only did 6 questions. Onward I go, and now I've just given personalized feedback to 200 students in the time that I could have graded a single essay. So this, to me, is empowering teachers. I didn't take teacher agency away. I still looked at the answers. I still ensured that I gave the feedback that I wanted, but I did it in a much more personalized way than I ever could. That's Gradescope.
And something really quick as we're going to the next one is we're not necessarily we are not paid by any of these companies.
Correct.
Nor are we advocating for the use of these particular tools. We just want to show you some of the things that are
examples. These are examples.
Exactly.
That's just a random YouTube video, but it's cool. Okay, DFIT. Well, do we have time?
Yeah, let's do this one.
Okay.
Okay, so if you have a computer, okay, or a phone, go to beta.diffit.me. This is a really, really cool tool for people.
We want you to use it.
Yeah, so do you want to go ahead, do you want to do like an example up there? So essentially what Diffit does is there are like 3 pieces you can do. It's focus on like English language arts in terms of you can put in literally anything. So that's what Charlotte loves doing, is adding the literally anything topic. I love putting in the URL of an article, but you can also do like any text or excerpt. But go ahead.
Let's get an article this time.
You want to do an article?
Sure. How about CNN?
Yeah, just go to CNN and get some random. Perfect.
There we go.
All right, toddler milk
milk
has no nutritional benefits. All right, great. Okay, so you could go in there and, for example, under the article, so she's going to paste the URL right there.
There it is.
Now, let's say that I'm a social studies teacher and I found a really cool article, but it's not written at the right grade level for my students, right? I can go, okay, I want to put it to make it 2nd grade level. And I want it in English, although I could also do some other language if I wanted to. But let's say I wanted it in English. I can then say generate resources, okay? Now keep in mind, each time this is doing this completely fresh. So I have no idea what it's about to show. It would be really fun to see what it ends up showing. But essentially what it's going to do is it's going to start off by creating an adapted reading passage. In this case, we're not logged in, so you can see the whole thing. This is a paid tool. It'll give you a summary of the article, but this adapted reading passage has taken the complexity of the text down to the right grade level. And it does so sometimes by clarifying things that you would know at like an 8th grade level, but you wouldn't at a 2nd grade level. It provides a summary, it provides us key vocabulary words, and then it can provide multiple choice questions, short answer questions, and open-ended prompts about that particular text, right? So again, easy task for a teacher that just takes a long time. But it could make that task a lot easier by making it more plug and play. Now, if you don't have the article already, you can do just like insert a topic, which is where we were going before, where you can say, hey, like I need something about like mitosis, I think is the one that Charlotte likes putting in there. And so go to that literally anything. Yeah, there you go. And so similarly, from nothing, it will generate something. So in case you have a teacher who's like, I don't have time to find the article, well, like, what do you want it to be about? You can put it straight in there, and then it starts working. Now, again, just like everything else, teacher in the loop, they need to be paying attention to what's coming out of this. But also, it can make life significantly easier for the teacher, especially for converting texts and adapting them to the appropriate grade level. Okay, kind of cool. So if you go there, you can play around with it. You can create a free account. I think it'll give you free access through the end of January at this point if you start it. Kind of a neat tool in there. All right, perfect.
And then finally, we're not going to do this one, but this is just another example of how we can customize learning. A lot of young children need to read things that are interesting to them if we want them to love learning and reading and being engaged with that. So eSpark creates choice texts where we can customize reading opportunities for students related to things that they care about, and they're really thoughtfully leveled as well. So there are things like this that aren't adaptive. Maybe you use some of those other tools like RazKids or something like that. This is just a little bit more personalized and adapted to the student who's actually using it so that they can not just have to read about butterflies if what they really want to read about is superheroes. And then finally, Conmigo, again, although Khan Academy is a partner of Code.org on the TJI initiative, we're not selling anything, and I just want to disclose that. But Conmigo is a personalized tutor. How many of you are familiar with Khan Academy? Okay, great. So Khan Academy's mission is to ensure that all students have access to learning. And in places like India, where there are a teacher shortage of 1 million teachers, they're never going to fill the gap. There are never going to be enough teachers in the next 20 years in India. There's also not enough teachers in certain parts of America, or the opportunity to learn certain subjects that students want to dive into. So Khan Academy makes those learning free, and there's ways to practice. But Conmigo is actually a personalized tutor. So even if you have a school and a teacher, the barrier for a tutor is very high. It's very expensive to hire a tutor. It's about $1 a minute in most schools. And so if it's just not possible to give most of our students a personalized tutor, Conmigo is trying to fill that gap. The difference between Khan Academy and their lessons and Conmigo is that once you create a lesson in Khan Academy, it lives there forever, and you just have to give people access to it. It's expensive to run an open model where you're having an interactive conversation. AI is very cost prohibitive. And so this does have a cost. It requires either a district license or a $9 a month subscription, but a $9 a month personalized tutor. This is a very safe, private way for students to have access to AI because it's built around all of Khan Academy's data, and it knows it's personalized. It isn't going to give any answers. If you ask it a question, it can handle math notation in a way that a regular LLM can't. So it's not OpenAI, well, it uses OpenAI as a base, but it's not a regular BARD or ChatGPT kind of thing. It's actually customized to be able to take math symbols. And it's customized to answer any type of science or social studies, anything that's a Khan Academy lesson, it can deal with. So that's K to 12. This is the tool that I would put in front of an elementary classroom where I wouldn't give them access to some of these other tools. And it truly does not give them answers. What it does is the same thing that you and I would do if we were having a one-on-one conversation with a student. Here is a strategy to solve this problem. Here is where I see you made a mistake. Let's take a look at where you went wrong. Oh, I noticed you didn't flip that fraction upside down. Oh, have you considered breaking down the problem in these 3 ways? And so it does not give answers, but it does walk you through the process of learning in the same way that a tutor would. I think this is personally a game changer, but it does have a cost barrier at the moment. They are actively working to find funding to make this free. It just isn't yet.
Okay, what we're gonna do with the sort of closing moments here, I wanted to make sure you guys had on your tables this toolkit from TJI.
Do we have till 1?
What's that?
We have till 1?
Yes, yeah. Oh.
We're good. We're fine.
Oh, my phone is on the wrong time.
We're good. We're good.
We're good. Excellent.
We're
We're
good,
good.
right? Okay.
Never mind. Yeah, I was like, dude, what in the world is happening here? All right, we are good. All right, so what we're going to do at this point then is we're going to jump into some more of the useful tools like practical policy tools and things like that for you. So I'm going to pass it your way to talk.
Yes, okay, so you were just handed an AI Guidance for Schools toolkit. This is what I've been working on. Teach AI is an initiative across multiple organizations. Although my salary is paid by Code.org, I don't represent Code.org, and I'm not trying to be a computer science teacher to you. We work across over 60 organizations, and we are actively looking for leaders like yourselves to share your best practices so that we can share those out. So this Guidance for Schools toolkit was developed with all of those partners, and that includes school partners, other nonprofit partners, academics, to figure out what do schools actually need to know right now. And this is probably the first #1 thing that they ask for is like, how do we talk to students about this? So this is everything that's available at teachai.org is available for you to use and modify. Please change it, chop it up, use it to start conversations in your district. So this is just one example. This is pretty simplified language to reach more students. You could throw it in an LLM and upgrade it, or make it appropriate for kindergarten. And that's totally fine. We want you to use it that way.
All right. So in addition to that, can you click?
I can hit the button.
Oh, there you go. In addition to that, so in Gwinnett County Public Schools, which is where I am, we decided to build out sample messaging that we use with our students and our families around like, what is this work, right? We had a lot of pushback, as you could imagine, especially back in 2017, around talking about AI and stuff like that, because people thought Terminator, robots, those sorts of pieces, right? They weren't thinking like, and even we didn't know about generative AI and stuff. It didn't really exist in our lexicon at that point. And so we came out with like 5 key messages, right? Things that are broad enough but specific enough, where like what's in bold is the thing that we made sure that our teachers understood and could talk about very fluently. And then this additional sort of italicized piece is like the deeper explanation, right? But we always start by talking to our parents and families around like technology is changing the world and how we interact. And that's like kind of a duh, but sometimes you have to say it out loud. And we typically talk about it in the context of a phone, like all the things we do on a phone now that we didn't do previously on a phone. And that's not that long ago that these came on the scene, right? We talk about how schools must prepare students for their future and not the present, right? Now, you'd think that's like a duh, but there are actually a lot of people who push back on this. And they're like, no, math, science, social studies, get the textbook out. And you're like, so you could do that, but that's not going to prepare your kid for the world that they're going to go in. And so that means that our school system, the Gwinnett County Public Schools, is focused on ensuring that every child can thrive in their future. So it's really important that people know that this is about every single child. We talk about how future readiness skills will enhance the student's learning experience, because the first thing that people go is, oh my God, not COVID Zoom time again. They think we're just going to put a bunch of kids on computers. And it's important to make sure they know that's not the case, right? And then finally, we say this loud and proud over and over again, is future readiness has to be critical for every single student. And that's because we have some parents who are like, nah, that's not my kid. They're never going to do this stuff. We're like, wait, hold on. First of all, like, let's upgrade that expectation, right? But also, no matter what your kid decides to do in their life, like, this is the future that's going to be in front of us. So making sure that every kid is ready for that world is important. So that toolkit you guys have access to with the QR code, it'll give you a bunch of different sample language and starting points. I think this is really, really important. It's really hard. You guys know as administrators in particular, if you get behind something, it becomes problematic. But if you come out in front and ahead, like you don't want to be caught in a situation where you're trying to on the fly come up with the punishment for a kid who used ChatGPT for something, right? You'd rather at the front end be able to say, hey, we talked about this to you guys. It's in our policy handbook. Our teachers are well versed in this. It creates consistency across your classrooms, and to make sure that if a teacher isn't going to allow something or is going to allow something, that they're very explicit about it. Anything else you want to say on this?
Just that there's a presentation, a Google Slides presentation with statistics and things that you can have talking points with your constituents, including teachers and parents, where I think it is a conversation, and there's a whole guide to how to facilitate those conversations over time, because it's not a one and done. It's certainly building capacity in your unique ecosystem.
So just a follow-up.
Yeah.
So in that toolkit,
Yep.
Does it get like kind of specific, or like how do you talk to?
Very specific. There's sample letters. There's no PDFs at all. It's all like, here's a template. Here's an actual methodology. Very practical. And after that, we're releasing a series of policy guidelines in the late winter, early spring. Then we'll have guidance for computer science educators, and then finally a whole AI literacy framework with examples. So hopefully by your start of your next school year, we can actually give you like a way to evaluate a curriculum, or how do you integrate this in different types of subjects.
Yeah, and we're going to jump into that in just a moment. But before we do that, we want to pause for a moment. What questions or comments or concerns do you guys have at this point? Yes?
I'm torn a lot between wanting my students to have the most up-to-date technology.
Yeah.
But also knowing that the most up-to-date technology is not technology with the best guardrail system. So like Claude has better guardrails, but also ChatGPT is pushing out so much new stuff. How do you find that balance between wanting them to be able to prepare they can, but also wanting them not to be in this wilderness that's not regulated?
Sure, that's a really good question, right? And I think every community is going to come to a different place on the spectrum of what they like and what they don't like. Broadly speaking, the guidance also differs by grade level, right? Like you want to be more and more strict the lower you go, because you just don't want a kid having access to weird stuff because they can't quite tell like the difference between what's right and wrong or what's true or not and those sorts of pieces. As we get into the high school level, especially for us with our Secondary AI high school, like what we try and do, and we'll show you this in a minute, is we have a broad framework where we teach the kids about like what's going on in the background of all these tools. So you have an understanding of like the ethical implications, the biases that could be present, what types of data sets are being incorporated, all those sorts of things. And once a kid is armed with that, then it really changes the how they interact with it, because it becomes less of a I'm interacting with Google and more of a I'm interacting with a semi-trusted partner where I have to sort of verify, wonder, and like question the intentions, right? Granted, it doesn't actually have intentions. It's just a data set, right, in the background, right? But it gets the kids to a place where you can actually get them potentially, assuming the user license agreements allow, you can get them into tools earlier and have them understand when it spits out some craziness, they know what's happening. And they're like, oh, see, that's why, like, you need to think about this when you're using this tool, right? I think the other reality that we have to balance with, and we realized this really early on, I remember the very first lesson we did on AI in Gwinnett County Public Schools. It was right before COVID, and it was 7th grade class. The teacher starts off, she thinks she's gonna like blow the world. It has like the word like AI written up here. Who knows anything about this? Expecting there to be silence. And all of a sudden these kids are like talking, oh my gosh, crap. Like we had to scrap the whole lesson because they knew it all already, right? I think similarly with these tools, so an interesting factoid is that usage of ChatGPT dropped by about 30% in May. And then it rebounded back in August. Does anybody know why? Which means our kids are using it, right? Like college kids, high school kids, or like my 6th grader, right? And not, like we don't actually talk about this a whole ton at home, but like they're already using it, right? So the real question goes for people who are like, just ban its use, right? The real question there is like, okay, I can like pretend that because it's not allowed on my like system that kids aren't using it, but they all got cell phones in their pockets and they're all using this anyways, right? So then that changes the equation as well, right? When a kid more than likely already has access to this from somewhere, whether it's a library computer outside of the school building to a phone, then the conversation becomes less about what should I prevent you from using and more around, hey, let me show you and talk to you and make sure you have your own understanding about the limitations, like the things I should watch out for, all that sort of stuff. And then it sort of shifts the conversation significantly. Does that make sense? Now, when it comes to like the image stuff, there are actually better guardrails around images, but even there you have a lot of the bias things that come out, which can be highly problematic, and you need to make sure that kids question those, because that creates its own issues. That's a great question.
Well, and I'll also say EdSafe AI has a checklist, COSIN has some resources, and so does Digital Promise about like how do I actually evaluate the thing that I'm considering to see if it's appropriate for students. So I hope that we do that eventually more on the policy side so that educators don't have to do all of the heavy lifting, that we would just have, you know, some guidance for protections for people, but we don't have that yet. So we need to make our own, you know, decisions.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say is that like future readiness isn't just about the tools. And I think sometimes we get caught up in these gimmicky new things. Most of the tools that exist today won't exist in a couple of years from now. And so like the more we get teachers to think about what's behind the tools and to educate kids on those, the tools just become like the surface level, the sort of skin on top of everything else.
Yeah, it's hard for us to think about sharing tools almost because we know that they're not going to be the tools even in 5 years, but we want to show some examples of what they can do because you don't know what they can do right now. So it's like a tricky balance. We're not trying to say any specific thing is the right thing, just that you use the process in order to make decisions with your constituents.
Yeah. What other question? Yes.
Yeah, so before I ask this question, you did, your team, your school implemented this, right? The AI?
Yes, and in a minute we'll jump into what we're actually implementing. Yep.
Okay, cool. So I guess like before you implemented this, like, did y'all do like a whole pilot, like a routine
Yeah, good question. So we're not district-wide yet, but we are in a set of schools. We're not officially district-wide yet. I'll put it this way. We've been upgrading our K-5 science lessons, our K-5 math lessons district-wide already. People just haven't figured it out yet because we're not calling it out. Does that make sense? So people go, oh, this is like a really cool, engaging new lesson. Ah, sweet, let me go do it. We're gonna tell them like 6 months later, hey, by the way, it lines up to this framework. I'll show you in just a second, et cetera, et cetera. Which is gonna be a lot of fun, right? I love it when we can just upgrade things and people like it, and then you tell them what's actually happening. But in terms of our community in particular, like we're talking about like 2017, right? Like there's no ChatGPT, there's no conversation around AI and those sorts of things. And we did a ton of community conversations. We were building a brand new school from the ground up, right? And there are a lot of conversations around like, what's this school going to be about? What is it not going to be about? A bunch of people are like, well, I don't want to send my kid to a STEM school. And you're like, it's not a STEM school. It's just a regular school that we're just upgrading to make sure that kids are ready for their future. We use a ton of those key messages. I had like listening sessions where I'd go out and I'd have people sort of pitch jobs that they think won't get automated. And I'd lay out how it could get automated and also like the data science pieces behind them, et cetera, et cetera. And it got that buy-in. Once it came to what's happening in the classrooms, we're building this with teachers. This is not some program that we have that you're like, go implement. We had like 130 teachers in the development of our framework, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And everyday teachers right now are still working on upgrading their lessons to meet like what they believe future readiness will be, with the hard part that the goalposts are moving really, really rapidly. And so like figuring out, okay, that used to be the right lesson last year. I can't just like pick up and even minimally change that lesson. I need a whole different one based on the environment that's going on now. So we really tried to sort of build and co-create that way. And then obviously as our school has been growing, so we're at almost 2,100 students now. We're going to grow to about 3,000 when it's full at that one high school. Granted, we're in a big system, right? So we have 182,000 kids, right? Like there's a lot of kids. But we have seen, like we thought that we'd only need one class. We have like a separate AI class as well, in addition to our general upgrades. We thought we'd only have like 26 kids for it. We ended up having 7 sections in the first year. We're at like 14 in year 2. Like kids were demanding this stuff. We just didn't know because we hadn't offered it before. Is that fair? So, and obviously that conversation is getting easier over time.
And you have the systems to adapt. I think that's the key piece right there. It's like there was a need from students, and so you adapted to it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump into like what does this actually look like in terms of frameworks, and we'll start off with the AI for K-12 one first.
Yeah, so I was actually an AI teacher up through 2021, and so I worked on the AI for K-12 framework as an educator. And AI for K-12 is on the more technical side of things. It's if you're looking to make sure that students are AI ready in a more technical way. So for example, the section 1 is about perception. That's about connecting our senses to sensors. So even a kindergartner can understand that their eyes are like a camera, right? But that a camera can be used to extend our senses. We can put that camera in space and take pictures with a telescope. We can put that camera on a microscope and see things that we can't see with our normal eyes. We can actually change what types of things we see. We can see infrared like a snake can, for example. And so when we help connect the idea of perception to sensors, then we can have lots of discussions across the curriculum. Then we can look at representation and reasoning. A representation is the way the computer understands the world. That is, for example, if you have a map, we don't put every feature on the map. If you're making a map of this area and you want to know about politics, you're going to have a very different map than if I want a map in order to go travel somewhere, right? The data that would be on the map would look very different, but it's still a map. The representation allows me to perform reasoning. So if I am the person that is trying to decide where I should go talk about my candidate, I'm going to use my map to determine which houses I should go to. If I'm trying to navigate somewhere, I'm going to make sure that I know I'm going to travel by bike or by bus, and that route would be different than if I was in a car. And so we can perform reasoning to reach our goals. The third idea is that computers learn from data, so the more data we give it and the way that we curate that data and that we do it responsibly, we get better results. The fourth idea is that we want these systems to interact naturally with us, which is why we don't have user manuals anymore. We actually started designing with the user in mind so that we can have conversations with someone who doesn't speak our language very, very easily. Or we can talk directly to our device and have it talk back to us. Those are natural interactions. These happen all the time. When you go to the self-checkout is actually interacting with you very naturally. You're able to perform that operation and you don't need anyone to explain to you what to do. Even if you go to Iceland and it's not in English, still works. And then the fifth is the center of the circle. It is everything all around. Everything should be infused with the idea of that there is societal impacts with these technologies. And the AI for K-12 framework this is just the basics. There's a whole continuum of information about like what you might teach in K-2, 3-5, 6-8, related to these 5 big ideas. So if you wanted to focus first of all on social interaction, or you already have a lesson about senses of animals in middle school, you can pull out just the right lessons. They have both standard type information and certain lesson plans associated. So that's a good starting point if you want to teach directly about the technology and not just the impacts.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum, so this is really good if you're like getting right into the technology and those sorts of things, right? What we learned in Gwinnett was that we weren't quite there yet for most kids. And so we're like, okay, we're going to start off with this swim, snorkel, scuba dive analogy, where we're essentially like, every kid should be able to swim in the world of AI, meaning they can understand and use AI technologies, right? Most kids should be able to proficiently use those. And then some kids should be able to scuba dive, which means developing AI technologies and those sorts of things. But we want to reimagine who's in the most and the sort of snorkel and scuba dive columns, right? Like we want to make sure that every kid sees themselves as a potential AI problem solver, right? And so reimagining that in terms of both gender, race, ethnicity, all those sorts of pieces, and making sure that kids early on are self-identifying themselves as being part of the work, right? So then what we did is we built a framework, right? And we didn't just build this by ourselves. We have friends from Google and Apple and Georgia Tech and MIT and like all over the place giving us a lot of feedback. And what we did was we thought about what would make a student AI ready. And by AI ready, we're sort of starting to transition that language to future ready. And notice it's not just about coding and programming. We're like, okay, we need to start off with a foundation in ethics. Like kids need to understand how bias happens within this work, how decision-making occurs, the principles of philosophy. With that foundation, we need to make sure every kid has creative problem-solving abilities. So they understand a design thinking process or some sort of problem-solving process. They understand collaborative leadership intentionally, and they're being pushed on their creativity. Now, in addition to those 2 things, notice I haven't said anything about technology yet, anything about screens yet, nothing like that, right? Then we get into mathematical reasoning, right? So, hey, do you understand probability and statistics? Because that's all that this technology is. It's just predicting what the next word is going to be or what the next image is that you would want, right? Do they understand computational thinking? And then getting deep into data science and programming, which is something where we have a computer science for all program starting in kindergarten for every kid in our whole system. And then the data science piece has been new because a lot of people, including myself, don't realize that most of these models just work on a big data set. And once you understand that and you understand what goes into the data set, that completely changes your perception and how you interact with these different tools. Now, we didn't just do that. We, behind this, built out a continuum. And I'm going to give you a preview tomorrow during one of the innovation sessions, I think, which will be in this big expanded room. I'll actually be giving this full sort of continuum out of what our best thinking is right now about by grade level in each of these areas. So this is like bias. That's like our bias component. What do kids need to be able to do all the way starting in kindergarten through 12th grade to be ready for the future? Keep in mind that this is the piece that we built out with 130 teachers of ours, and the part that we regularly update every year because we're understanding and learning more. Now, that's the holistic part. So these things show up in every classroom all throughout the day, right? We're not at the point of every lesson every day yet. We're working towards that, right? But we think that through the K-12 experience, if you're upgrading the existing lessons to get to these skills, what's going to happen is the holistic experience that the kid has K-12 will end up being fundamentally different, right? So if we do 1% tweaks at every level, sort of every day, you end up with a significant sort of tweak over time, a fundamentally different trajectory. And we think that's going to be more sustainable than trying to do like huge 80% shifts of like, let's all do these lessons now sort of pieces. At the same time, for those scuba divers, we built out a 3-course sequence in career and technical education in the state of Georgia. So you have access to these state standards if you want them. Where we built out the standards, they're built off of our framework because we want to make sure it didn't go the route of just like technical computer science background, but we want to make sure that we're getting kids ready for the future. We did that with a whole bunch of really cool partners from across the country, and it's been going really well. This is the class where we started off thinking it was going to be one class, and now it's like one of the biggest pieces in that school and overall.
And I have a couple of resources as well. We somehow didn't put the slide in there, but I worked on an initiative called AIforteachers.org. It does have a single course that you can use and download that is that Foundations of AI. It doesn't assume that students have had any programming prior, but it does get into some technical details. There's also a course there that is for British literature in 12th grade, where all students are miserably experiencing 12th grade and trying to, graduate. And so we targeted that because we worked with a teacher in a rural area that just wanted that to be more connected to the student's world. And so she started with Frankenstein as a spine text and talked about the relationship of humans and technology throughout the whole course with all of the correct texts that are related to British literature, but in a way that was far more engaging for the students to apply directly to their lives. So that curriculum is also there. There's also some connections to middle school science and some other resources related to AI literacy broadly, not just technically. Also, Code.org has some new AI resources. Some of them are for teacher learning, and there's also a post-CSA course that uses real-world tools outside of the Code.org platform that are specifically related to AI. So there are lots of resources that are from not brand new learners all the way through, post-AP that are available to you. So happy to share those at any time. And so, they're on that board over there.
All right, we have a couple minutes left. What I'd like for you to do, if it's okay, is just take a moment. Like, we gave a lot of stuff. Apologies for the speed. I blame it on the shuttles, getting y'all back on time. Take a moment to digest what you took in. And the question I'm hoping you'll answer for yourself is like, what's the first next thing you're going to do with this information? Or like, what's the question you need answered before you can continue? So take like a minute to yourself. Like, what's that first next step based on what you've heard today? And then we'll come back together.